Namaste. Our speaker for the day is Brother Anand Khatri, who will talk about poetry and theosophy. Brother Anand Khatri is a member of Chauhan Theosophical Lodge. He is faculty with AIT School of Architecture and Planning. He is a Master's in Architectural Conversation from SPA in 1996 and has over 25 years of professional experience in architecture. He is the founder of UVCT, Urban Village Charitable Trust, a research repository for rural planning and urban villages, a founder for Poesis Society for Poetry. He is a published poet. He has been working on poetry as a spiritual art and explores the interconnections of the work of poetry with day-to-day life. Let us all now welcome Brother Anand Khatri.
Thank you, Swarnina. Thank you, Kritika. Thank you, brothers and sisters. It is an opportunity to be here with you all and talk poetry and theosophy. You know, in my life, both these things have had a very long journey. I cannot separate either of them from the other. And that is why, you know, when Swarnina talked to me about doing a presentation, I really wanted to talk to you about poetry and theosophy. So poetry and theosophy is more about my individual journey through theosophy and my individual journey through poetry, of which I can recall. And while making all the researches in parallel areas, while reading through theosophical books, while trying to work as an earnest member, and while trying to work on my spiritual life, I realized that both have great interconnections. In fact, I feel that poetry cannot be separated from any spiritual endeavor. I might ask Kritika or Swarnina, is my screen visible to you all?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. And has the page changed to the second page? Can you see the two marigold flowers?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So now the prayer through which we begin our meetings, the prayers through which we conclude our meetings, and everything that we actually do in terms of invocations, chants, mantras, anthem, instructions, even all of the aphorisms of Vedas, songs, everything is poetry. So poetry is and has been an essential part of our spiritual constructions, religious constructions, and henceforth we must try and isolate poetry and try and see कि इस कविता को कैसे समझा जाए, इसके इंटरकनेक्शंस क्या हैं और इसके जरिए क्या हो रहा है. So that is why I had developed this whole discussion, and at the root of the whole existence of poetry, it might appear to be a jumble of words, but every poet, while working on poetry, is not working with the spoken language. Every poet, when he writes poetry, he might begin with Mausam, with a beautiful flower. He might begin with something which is an object of physical attraction, but his dwelling on poetry takes him deep into an intuitive glimpse of what is happening. Languages definitely play a role because they help separate the mind of the poet and the layers of the mind of the poet from the personality of the poet and develop a communications. So words are just the carriers of a feeling. That is why in our theosophical studies of what I have been taught is that when you read something, you must reflect. You must not understand. So those reflections are individual reflections. Say, for example, I'm reading something from a book as difficult as Voice of Silence. I have used the Voice of Silence very often in this presentation because the word Voice of Silence in itself explains what poetry is. Every poet, while constructing a poem, is building silences in between, just as before the opening prayer and after the opening prayer, there was a silence which is an affirmation to bring the self forth. Similarly, while weaving words, a poet is working with silences. Now, it has been talked a lot about poetry through by different people, starting from C. Jinaras Das to Rohit Mehta to Aurobindo and many others, starting from Plato, that poetry is a connection to something deeper. And that is exactly what we are trying to do in Theosophy. We are trying to uncover ourselves from the unnecessary. We are trying to unite the mind, our mind, which is separated in between which separates itself into two identities, thereby confusing our thoughts, thereby creating a lot of ripples. So poetry is intuitively escaping this disconnect and trying to dip very deep. In fact, all my journey through poetry has been a journey into communication. And poetry has always stood by me as a second me. There is a scholar who has been working on poetry as a healing art. His name is Jay Parini, who claims that languages connect us to the accumulated reservoir of knowledge, which transfers through generations across cultures and races. And in fact, I must tell you that whenever any of you do hello writing, or whenever any of you is doing sincere writing wherein you are trying to connect yourself to your own higher self and establish a better flow, then your eyes are half closed. This mudra is called the Unmani mudra. With eyes half closed, the chakras get energized. This is the Unmani mudra in which the eyes are half closed, is very similar to the position in which a poet is writing his poetry. He is not looking into the world. He distances himself or herself from his own self. And through this distancing, there is a visual projection in which he says, "Main dukh mein hoon." So whenever a person is saying "Main dukh mein hoon," he has been able to segregate the person who is feeling the pain from the writer. And it is this which in poetry is the Sakshi Bhav. You become the viewer, and henceforth you are able to undo a quantum of the karma that is happening to you. The Unmani mudra and the projected slowness of the mind is what in Silva method of mind control is called the alpha level of thoughts. For a brief while, I'll take you into a story. This is a very beautiful story which I tell everyone. This is the story of a Himba tribe. In fact, in all tribal societies which exist in forests and deep in cultures and deep into greens away from the cluster of urbanization, they all have a symbolical signature musical style. And that style is something that unites the complete tribe. Now, in Himba tribe, which is there in Africa, something very unique has been happening all these years. They identify themselves to a rhythm. So, say, for example, if I was a woman and I was to conceive, then before conceiving a child, I would go and sit under a tree and conceive a rhythm, a poetic rhythm, which is a word with a rhythm. Something that happens in other spiritual cultures, like the transcendental meditation, like in Radha Swami Satsang Vyas, and many other processes, like in our Gayatri Mantra, where we do chanting, like in Sukogaki International, as an azan, wherein we are repeating a particular hymn, or as we do in science of while we build our affirmations. So this woman goes and conceives a poetic rhythm under a tree, under an open sky. After she conceives this rhythm, she shares it with the father of the child to be. The child is conceived with the rhythm in the minds of the parents. While the child is born, the midwives sing the rhythm, and then it grows with the child. For social corrections, अगर वो बच्चा कोई गलती करता है, तो ये rhythm उसको पूरा गांव घेर करके गा करके सुनाता है, so that the child gets connected to the rhythm which brought him or her into this world. And when the person dies, the rhythm is sung again for the last time and left with the soul for its onwards journey. Now, when we view this, along with what is happening in our lives in other social practices, we realize that this practice is more established in our cultures, where a repetitive mantra is recited inside during the course of the day and inside our mind. Almost always it is with us. With most spiritualists, it is a habit that they keep on reciting something or the other. Now, C.W. Leadbeater in the book At the Feet of the Masters explains the second ray, where the sensitivity to poetry, art, and music is there to connect the world of the heart and the power of a rhythm. The CWL has made a very loud, very clear, distinct remark on evolution through arts. And poetry is at the root of all arts, whether it is painting, whether it is architecture, whether it is dance, whether it is music. Poetry is the root. Now, poetry is understood can be explained through the word poiesis. In fact, I do not want to go into the etymological discussion on poetry, because then the discussion becomes very long, and all the points that I have touched would not be discussed. But nonetheless, I just have to discuss two things. One is, in Chinese language, the word poetry stands for a combination of two characters. One is word, the other is temple. So poetry is the temple. It's a word temple. It's a mantra. Now, in fact, in Natya Shastra, Bharat Muni has very clearly explained how poetry, at the root of all arts, gives birth to ingenuity and creativity in arts. There is an author called author William Edgar O'Shaughnessy, who has written very clearly about the power of poetry. In fact, this was written in the light where a person, one man with a dream at pleasure, shall go forth and conquer a crown. Now, the energy to die for the nation, the energy to carry on a meeting, the energy to unite everybody with the same thought, is there in poetic writing just because the rhythm and the meaning connect immediately with the soul. So, three aspects of poetry: rhythm, meaning, and silence. And as soon as the individual connects through these three, that person or that soul is able to connect to the micro environment of poetry. The meaning of this particular verse goes to explain that with the strength of a song, with the strength of a poem, you can make your dreams come true. You can build empires and pull down empires. And that is what was happening in our freedom struggle also. That is what was happening in our, in the minds of people who were laying their lives while fighting for freedom. And that is exactly what is happening with us when we are trying to uncover ourselves or discover ourselves, as whichever ways we like to put it. Now, poetry is an art of listening. In fact, Aurobindo calls it the art of seeing, but I have always thought that poetry is the art of listening. When you have silenced yourself to the extent that you can listen not just to the world, not just to yourself, but to yourself and to the world together, then you are able to weave something which is of universal value. A poet is a person of limitless realities. He maintains a trance-like confluence of the reality and the imaginary, choosing from the multiple possibilities was what suits the temper of his flow. More than often, a poet is working as a channel. At that instant, when the poetry flows down the mind of the poet, just as a vision flows down the mind of a seer, just as an intuitive glimpse gets born into the mind of a person, poetry flows through a poet. Now, this particular discussion on kaleidoscopic poetry tries to explain that while the world is a material world, that is, we have got limited number of materials through which we build our houses, through which we knit our clothes, through the sand, the earth, the water, the air. Similarly, emotional world also has got a limited number of materials. And similarly, the mental world also has got only a limited number of materials. But the truth through these materials gets into different configurations for everyone. So kaleidoscopic truth is a word that I have been using very often to explain the individualization of truth. And henceforth, it tries to also explain the poetic doing, the poetic justice that is there. When I read a particular line from a book and when you read a particular line from the book, then reading for each becomes different. Meanings for each become different. So it was only very recently that during a meeting, when somebody was discussing as to what is the meaning of a particular thing that is written, it was a discussion on the voice of silence. So the best comment that came up was that we are required to reflect, again, not try to understand. Understanding has its own limitations, but reflection carries it very far. So it is this reflection that you do in hello writing, you do in meditation, you do in poetry, and Theosophy is full of these reflections in its books. C. Jinaras Das, whose writings I really admire, and I have been reading and rereading most of his works, explains that true poetry is both liberation and achievement, and in poetic moods, all, each in his degree, the great poet and his masterpiece, and the would-be poet and his first attempt, sense something of the future, that future where, as joyous, free, willing souls, each soul's intuition is a poem, and each action of his the theme of an epic. It was this particular paragraph from CJ which made me think and discuss with myself, which made this whole discovery, and this presentation is actually a compilation from my book, Poetry as a Spiritual Art, and also a journey which is still an ongoing journey for the last 4-5 years now. And so here C. Janaraj Das ji explains that life is purposely binding us together in all kinds of ways. I would like to read through it because, or maybe I can skip a few lines, and then he talks about karmalessness here. The word is karmalessness. It is the state where karma, which we have created in the past, no longer affects us. Of course, we cannot apart from the reaction of that force on ourselves. That is karmalessness. When once it is generated, but we can stand first. Let me deal with the fact that wherever there is true art, in it is found the quality of liberation or of becoming free. And I will take as an instance one which you can put to the test. Consider those periods when you are sad and depressed, when all the time you are surrounded by dark thoughts and you seem to be in the depths. If at those times you will manifest any artistic instinct which you possess, you can grasp your depression and create something out of it. One way to do is to write a poem. When you have so written a poem describing your depression, you will find that you have become liberated from your depression. That does not mean that after you have written your poem, you have not still have your sadness, but it will no longer be a kind of sadness which held you before. Through your astral body may still be, though your astral body may still be sad, you will have stepped outside the astral body, for you will have created out of your depression a thing which stands apart from you. And as you look at your work of creation, you will no longer be bound to your depression. So this is where he is explaining Sakshi Bhav. In his book, Creative Silence, Rohit Mehta ji has discussed this point without mentioning poetry. But since the discussion on Voice of Silence was there, that is why I brought in the quotes from the Voice of Silence, which explain the two stages of the mind. And I am quoting here from Rohit Mehta's book, Creative Silence, where he says that if you leave the mind even for a brief while, and you may have given it a deliberate choosing point, it finds out its own plane of inclination. It keeps flowing, from one thought to the other, from the second to the third. And even if you try to keep track of it in between, then it flows away. It is continuously drifting. And this drifting is a tendency of the mind. So thinking and thought is not the tool. One must inquire the point to which it drifts and also how it drifts. Why the mind drifts? The underworld of mind's associations. It's because of the underworld of mind's associations that the mind is drifting. So from here, if I go straight into what Aurobindo has talked about in his poetic theory, then it would actually make a lot of sense. Here he says that there are 4 kind of stages of mind which are writing poetry. Sri Aurobindo actually had talked about the poetic theory in a bit more detail. And he talks about the higher mind, which is aware of the self, the illuminated mind, the intuitive mind, and the overmind. The overmind is the point where the higher mental and the lower mental are interconnecting, if I relate it to the theosophical understanding of our bodies. And the intuitive mind, where he talks about flashes of surprise and full of ecstasy, is actually the lower mental. And the illuminated mind is the astral or full of emotional energy. And the higher mind is just the mind which is more aware of its energetic self. So here, when we compare this particular statement and the statement where we were in terms of the discussion with Rohit Mehtaji's thing, one must inquire the point to which it drifts and also how it drifts. Then it starts making sense. They both are talking the same thing. This will get better explained in the next slide, where HPB in The Voice of Silence talks about, thou canst not travel on the path before thou hast become the path itself. There is another place in The Voice of Silence where HPB talks about being the rose before the rose is eaten up by the moth. The mind of a man is a very clever instrument, says Rohit Mehta. For its own security, it splits itself into two. One side in judgmental over the other. One sits in in a position of judgment over the other. So that is where he is trying to explain that to understand the voice of silence, you have to understand the voice before you understand the silence. At times, we are so overcharged with ourselves and with our pursuit that we do not understand the voice. We head straight towards the silence. There in this book, he talks about Atmagyan and Tattvagyan also. In fact, The Voice of Silence, which was written by H.P. Blavatsky, or which was, intuitively brought to the world through HPB, is also a prose poem. So, the presence of poetry in all our surroundings explains that we are somewhere greatly connected to this instrument, but we have not started using the instrument to the extent that we should use. Now, this is a mantra from the Bharat Samaj Puja. In this particular slide, I am making a small etymological discussion wherein I am trying to bring forth the meanings of the word kavi. I am not selling poetry to you. I am not saying that poetry is the only great thing, but definitely understanding, learning, being in poetry, and a poetic understanding of life is what is required. That is definitely true. So here in the last line where it says Anantamavyam Kavim Samundret Vishwashambhuvam. So there Kavim is a word which is used for Narayan. कि नारायण अनंत अव्यय और पूर्ण ज्ञान की अवस्था में समुद्र में लेटे हुए हैं, विश्व के जो नारायण हैं वो. So this is actually one definition where the word kavi is used, and in other Sanskrit dictionaries the word kavi defines a lot of areas where people with gifted insights, sensible, enlightened, prudent, knowing, in fact it is also talking about a thinker, a prophet, a keeper of the herd, sage, seer, and so on and so forth. Now, this is a slide on expression of poetry, the language of the heart. Every poem is an aspect of bioluminescence, which a poet carries to another, creating more light in the night. Language in poetry is just the tool for carrying. It is just the carrier. It is not the end. So language is the craft. It is not the art. Poetry is indicative of the presence of the individual in its recitation. It creates different meanings as each heart that interprets it sees it differently. Coming back to Sri Aurobindo's poetry theory, this discussion begins with what Plato had talked about poetry and poets. Plato कौन थे तो हम जानते ही हैं theosophical studies से, लेकिन Plato believed that the poet is to be inspired. For the poet is a light and winged and holy thing, and there is no invention in him until he has been inspired and out of his senses, and the mind is no longer with him. When he has attained to this state, he is powerless and unable to utter his oracles. He said in the Ion and the Epic and the lyrics, poets uttered all their beautiful poems not through art, but through divine inspiration. Now, this inspiration could come from what is called the unconscious is the subconscious. What is the subconscious is actually the other mind. And as I had shown you this slide earlier, in terms of the poetic theory of Sri Aurobindo, in fact, Sri Aurobindo, in all his life, he was only a poet. C. Janaras Das's works have been completely poetry. And in this particular slide, Sri Aurobindo says, to be the mantra of the real is the highest achievement of poetry. He tries to explain that while poetry seems to be projecting small glimpses of the truth, to be the mantra of the real is the highest achievement of poetry. And what is happening here, as I had explained earlier, it was silence, it was rhythm, and it was meaning. So, meaning through language, that is words, rhythm, that is the energy which unites the language to us, and then the silence. These are three things. कभी आप किसी कविता की किताब को देखिए, तो मैं गजल की किताब को नहीं कह रहा, लेकिन अगर आप किसी छंद मुक्त कवि की किताब को देखेंगे, तो उसमें लाइंस में स्पेसेस होती हैं. Because today's poet is actually building silences in his poetry also. I must also tell you here that poetry in ancient Indian, times was a measure to invoke spirituality. Every rishi was writing in his own verse form. There are so many verse forms. There are syllable loads which actually work through Laghu and Guru. That is sound which is the lesser sound and sound which is the syllable with more emphasis. 1 and 2 is what we call it. So 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2 is one verse form. All of Hanuman Chalisa is written at 2 into 8, that is 16 syllable load in every line. People and spiritualists were always writing only in verse forms. And a particular rishi or a sage or a seer would actually master a verse form and go on reciting and writing in that verse form all its life till the time the rhythm would take over the mind. So it is the rhythm that is actually getting to the point of establishing a connection, and then the poetry flows. So that was a different era. In fact, a lot of other Sanskrit scholars do it still today. And I have met quite a few of them. And they recite Sanskrit poetries, they write sonnets in Sanskrit and so on and so forth, and everything in verse form. So the tradition is definitely being carried out, just that from my life I am quite oblivious of it because of my positioning in the world right now. So in the integral yoga, Sri Aurobindo talked about an integral yoga wherein the presence of reality, spirituality and rhythm was there together. poetry was an essential part of his integral yoga, where he says to divinize the human, to immortalize the mortal, to spiritualize the material. These were the three things that were there. In fact, most of the works of Shakespeare, why was Shakespeare very, successful in literature always, was because his verses were always carrying that energy, the energy of emotion. Say, for example, I scream, and I scream at the top of my voice right now. There is no possible communication to build that scream into alphabets, letters. Say, for example, I become happy. So that happiness, that scream, that emotion cannot be built and conveyed in languages. So the way languages around us are structured today have their own limitation. And that is why that rhythm is necessary. Shakespeare in Midsummer's Night Dream says, the poet's eye is a fine frenzy, rolling, doth glance from heaven to earth, from earth to heaven. And as imagination bodies forth the forms of things unknown, the poet's pen turns them to shapes and gives to airy nothings a local habitation and a name. We are towards the end of the lecture, and herein I have tried to use the story of the blind man and the elephant to define the truth through poetry. In this particular sketch, what I am trying to say is that poet is not able to see the complete reality. He is able to see only a glimpse of reality, a very small glimpse. So this is my hypothesis, that if I unite the poetry of all the world, if I unite the poetry of the complete world, then maybe one can construct the truth of as seen through all the poets. So somewhere they are all touching some aspect of life, some reality, but for that complete reality, all the poetry has to be brought together for it to be the giant conception that it is in front of the blindness of the poet. Now, that is why it is said that poets must share their poetry with other poets. What you write, you must share with somebody else, and so on. Now, this was also explained by Anekantvad, Sadavad, that is the conditioned reality and the many-sided reality. And in fact, this world also has been defined as poetry, and the creator of the world is often said to be a poet himself. At the end of this session, I have, 2 poems to recite for you, wherein I believe that you will be able to associate the journey of a human soul in the first one. And, this particular verse has been written with the intention of all my journeys. And I have used the metaphor of, the unprecedented journey of the soul, what is happening, and the many lives that we live as the carrier in this discussion. So I'm just going to recite 2 of these small poems before I end my discussion and get to the points of conclusion, which I would like you to carry back after this discussion. This says, singular in conception, I am constituted of the many in me. I am rough, stony and hard. I get swampy when I am soft. My crest does not carry trails. Marks of trodden path do not stay. Mysteriously obscured to the rays of light, undiscovered is my nature am I. Syllables of primordial creativity evidence my reality. Strange is the freshness in my exotic air. In the caves of formative ingenuity, my mountains sleep, while in the silent, relentless hunt, many I have lost. I have reserves of those lost in time, fossils from births of centuries past. Paleo paints walls of my caves anoint. Creative inhalation announces freshness. Past a holocaust, exhalation in my breeze. In a cloud, I could descend from the sky to meet the riverside fog. And a newness to every touch conceit, numerous gems and treasures in my desert sleep. I precede time, timeless am I. I am virile, beyond a truth and a lie. Lost within myself is me, for a forest am I. So I here is the soul which is journeying. I here is the traveler. I here is not me. So herein I have tried to use the metaphor of a forest to explain the journey. And this could be closest to my description of intuitive poetry. I will explain you the glimpse that came to my mind when I was writing this one recently, one morning, just 2 days ago, when I said to myself that I have to be speaking to, thinkers and spiritualists, and I have to be able to connect with them. So I was able to connect to your journeys, and I was able to connect to your thoughts somewhere, and I was able to write this. Herein the many me are myself in many lives. So what I write is that in this moment, in this instant, I have with me the many incarnations I am to live, and live the strength of many arms and wings, wholly united and conjoined with myself, touching my soul. In this moment, in this instant, I have with me the love and the laughter of all lives, the rivers I bathed and the skies I loved, the forests, fields and the seas, wholly united and conjoined with myself, touching my soul. In this moment, in this instant, I have with me the journeys and the lessons of all lives, the milestones achieved and left with a sparkling awareness, radiance and energy in my deeds, wholly united and conjoined with my soul, myself, touching my soul. In this moment, in this instant, I am ready to pull all that I have, and I have earned to pay off my debts. I am compassionate and reignite to be where I am, wholly united and conjoined with myself, touching my soul. Thank you. And before I read the conclusions, as conclusions which I want you to think and come back to me in case if something more constructive can be developed on this discussion, I would really be very happy. The first thing that I want to say as a conclusion and as a carryback is that science of poetry in an individual must not be overlooked. Every soul's journey through life at some point establishes this intuitive connect. Whenever you see children getting into this mode, or yourself, do not overlook it. Establish that connect, because it doesn't happen every time. The second is a little bit of madness that each of us carries in our life and keeps it in the hiding must shine out in the open. This requires coming out of the limited self and realizing one life, an act that would give more acceptance, more tolerance and understanding to the others in the society at large. Poets must take themselves seriously and must try to evolve an intuitive understanding of the world. More of spiritual reading and more of poetic communities, poetic conversations will show the light. Thought and intellect are the new age drugs, and we must seek a bit of silence to remain loving and sane. CJ's explanation of art and poetry needs meditative investigation. research must come out of labs into the labyrinths of calm within closed eyes. Poetry is definitely a tool for deep contemplation. Thank you.
Thank you for this deliberation, Anand. Since it is only a talk, not a question and answer, I will request Smriti Sagar to give the vote of thanks, and then we might spend 5 or 7 minutes for discussion if somebody wants to add on something. Okay, and then we'll do the closing prayer. So over to Smriti Sagar.
Thank you, Brother Anand, for your interpretation through a very different approach. Theosophy is a way of life, and we all should live it in our very way of daily life. There are so many newer ways to look at life's amazing forms, and we can know it by sincere observation. Thank you all attendees of the session. We will organize more such sessions and intimate you. Thank you.